3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. And with me is Gary Stein. Gary, how are you, my friend?
Stan, I was doing great until I talked to Danny before our Zoom, and now I understand my mom threw out a fortune back in the 1960s, but we'll talk about that later. Other than that, I'm great.
My mom threw my fortune out in the late 50s.
Crazy.
We're going to be talking sports collectibles with the guy who knows it all, and that is Danny Black of Baltimore Sports Collectibles, right after this word from my sponsor, the Costas Inn. And everybody knows the Costas Inn. Speaking of collectibles, everybody knows the value of a Costas Inn dinner. But did you know that you don't even have to go in the restaurant to eat the food at the Costas Inn? If you're still among those people that aren't comfortable yet going into restaurants, the Costas Inn has a plan for you. They've stepped up their curbside. It used to be called takeout, but all you do is go online, CostasInn.com. You can order your food. After looking at the menu, you can pay for your food. And when you pick it up, they'll bring it out to your car, and everything is packed immaculately. They would get a very high PSA rating. We'll find out what that means in just a minute. But the Costas Inn, located 4100 North Point Boulevard, they've been open in that location for over 50 years. They've been a friend of Stan the Fan for about 28 of those years, and they're still going strong. One of Baltimore's favorite places. We welcome Danny Black in from Baltimore Sports Collectibles. And Danny, when we have you on, and periodically we'll always have you on when there are issues around the collectible world where a card is sold for some astronomical value, or a glove gets sold, a Mickey Mantle glove or something like that. But tonight I thought, because we were overdue to get you back on, I just wanted to take you through, because my wife has been on me for the last 3 or 4 years. I've got about 8 years of baseball cards. They're all in boxes. They're original boxes. I don't have a mother that could throw them out, but I got a wife who's on the verge of wanting to throw them out. Do I have anything? I've got like 1986 through 92. All the cards, they're in the boxes. Do I have anything of value in there, or could I set a fire tonight and nobody would be the wiser?
Let me start off with the pleasantries. Hello, guys. Glad to be here.
I think he's saying I got nothing of great value.
Always a pleasure to be on. And unfortunately, back then, the only way the companies knew how to make more money was to print more cards so people could buy more product.
Okay.
They would print upwards of 2-3 million cards per set per year.
Okay.
And even now, where they print a lot, it's still 1 to 2 million. So I mean, you're back in those days, there was no autographs, nothing was limited edition. And there's very few cards from that time period that have strong value, unfortunately.
What about rookie cards? Are they worth like a Ken Griffey rookie card, a Frank Thomas rookie card?
Yeah, I mean, you have your occasional exceptions. The Ken Griffey Upper Deck, the famous rookie card, is very hard to get in good condition. So it's the #1 most graded card in the history of baseball cards, to give you an idea of how many were out there.
Is the Ken Griffey Upper Deck card?
Yep, the first set of Upper Deck with this big smile on the card. So that's the most graded card ever. Only 4% of that card graded in mint condition. So for the millions that are out there, that's how few, and all the values in that mint condition and high value. So it's hard, but if you have that 89 Upper Deck Griffey, it's worth looking at.
Now, before the show, I showed you one card, the Ken Griffey rookie card. Of course, I've misplaced it, but you can see these cards are in pristine shape. They've been in the box since 1990. Would that automatically grade as perfect, or
looks a little bent to me or something, doesn't it? Or no?
Or is my taking it out in the air already ruined that?
Well, it's actually, from the print production process, not guaranteed to be a mint card. Just hypothetically, if you've ever printed on paper and you know how challenging of a process that can be, It's the same thing with the cards. Not every card is going to come out what would be a perfect 10. In fact, it's a much smaller number than you would believe.
All right, one more question before I turn you over to Gary. Is then you hear, because my wife has looked it up and says the Ken Griffey card's worth $100. So let's just say,
Sure.
then it's not somebody's not going to pay me the $100 without getting it graded, right? So then that's going to be a cost I've got against it. So can you explain what that is, the grading process?
Well, the grading process is a way to evaluate the quality and condition of the card. Do you have to do it to sell a card? No. And in fact, one of the things that people do is they look for opportunities to buy a card that's ungraded and maybe at a good price, get it graded, add some value. And in fact, that's happened to be what I was showing earlier. So this was a card that I got from a client. You want me to turn it around? So this was a card that I picked up from a client, and it's a Mickey Mantle
card.
Yep, 1967. And what we're going to do is, and I'm going to help my client, is actually send it out to get graded. And what they're going to pay for grading is going to be a fraction of what it'll add to the value of the card once it is graded at the grade level that we expect.
Now, that card was in plastic, a shield. Is that card in pretty mint condition? It looked it on screen.
Once you get pre-1980, we generally, the collectible hobby world generally does not believe that you're going to find things in mint condition. It is virtually impossible to find a mint condition card pre-81. A good card grade is typically equal to the decade in which it was printed. So if you got cards from the 60s, a 6 would be a great grade. Cards from the 50s, a 5 would be a great grade. And that's called collector's grade. That's just a rough ballpark. But that really ends in the 80s. Once you get to the 80s, everything jumps up. If it's not a 9 or a 10, then it's really deflated value.
Gary, I know you got
more
rid
like
of
a
some
5 or
of your
6.
collectibles 6 months
Yeah,
ago.
I mean,
7 months
I've
ago.
got some. I don't think I have quite what you have because I've been to your library there, and I know some of the autographs and things you have. But let me ask you this, Danny. Let me start with this. Actually, if you're like, I'm not a collector. I didn't collect these things to collect. I collected cards because I enjoyed it. I was a kid. I was, even as an adult, like sports, obviously. But now that I'm 61 years old, and my wife is kind of on me too, to pare down a little bit, as it were. What's the most reasonable way for somebody like me, not a collector, who may want to part with some stuff, to figure out how to even start evaluating what I have?
A great question. And the good thing is you're old enough, you qualify as vintage. So we can get you graded.
Thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, Danny, he didn't tell you how he got those cards. He used to beat up kids in Miami and steal their cards.
Just the ones that called him old, maybe.
Only some of that is true, Danny.
I mean, not to toot my own horn, that's exactly what I do. I come in with people and it's really whatever the situation is, whether it's cleaning out the house, whether it's something that's been passed down through something that's happened in the family, whether it's just time to liquidate something that they know they've been sitting on for a while, whatever the situation is, I come in and we figure out a game plan. I don't charge to come in and just sit down and have that conversation. That's really just to help guide you. So if you had, whatever cards you had sitting around, we would make a plan and we would say, hey, these might be, path A, these might be path B, these might be a great donation.
Gotcha. So here's something. When I was a kid growing up, and probably for you and Stan also, you went to the drugstore or whatever, to the newsstand, you picked up candy and the cards. It had the gum on it and all that stuff, and there was pack of 10 for a dime, whatever it was, right? When my son started collecting cards about 20 years or so ago, it was different. You could still go to the corner store and get the cards in a pack, but you could also go to shows, for instance, or just even, other places, and already get cards that were encased in glass, that were single cards, that were more expensive. So my question to you is, Does that mean that those cards were already evaluated and graded and have a higher value right from the get-go?
Good
100%. Yeah, and that's a great question. So here's just a quick example, and I know this is going to be a little tough on Zoom, but here's a Jordan Westberg limited edition autograph rookie. And this has already been graded. It was graded at a 9. And if you were to sell this versus an ungraded card of the same edition, another one of these 250, the buyer is going to say, listen, I know what I have. You know, it's 1 in the hand versus 2 in the bush. So I know what I have in that 9. And there's going to be an established sales history saying the 9 has sold approximately this price. When it's ungraded, it leads to more, you know, I don't know. Does that look better? Does that look worse? How much do you pay? How much do you not pay? And that's a lot, leaves a lot more to chance. So especially when you're buying online, or if you don't want to take the risk of what a grade might come back as, then absolutely buy it pre-graded, and you'll know exactly what you're getting. And I enjoy doing both, to be honest with you.
So let me slip it one more in. Also, there's another thing where you can buy cards that like have a game worn jersey of that player, like a little patch, maybe even part of a bat. I've even seen like a base, like part of a base comes in that. So the question is there actually a guarantee that that player actually wore that jersey, number one? And number two, is a jersey better than a bat? Is a bat better than like, what's the hierarchy in terms of value of those types of cards?
Great question. So let me take them in order, or reverse order. The value is always going to be in the player, not the artifact or the memorabilia.
Okay.
And typically, you're not going to have a choice on the memorabilia in a given year. Typically, it'll be this year we're doing jerseys, or this year's hitters bat collection. So you don't always have that choice. But without a doubt, the player is going to carry most of the value. And I happen to have this sitting right here. This is an example of a Reds pitcher. And what you can actually see is part of his jersey has been cut out and actually put into the card.
And who is that? Who is that?
That is Tony Santillan. And
He's a current prospect.
He's a younger guy with Cincinnati. I don't know that I'm going to retire on this card. I just happen to have it nearby when you brought up the question, to be honest. We don't need to worry about Tony too much. But the idea is that patch is so cool. And on the back of the card, different companies will handle it different ways. And this is why I love your question. Some companies say this is guaranteed to be used in a game by so-and-so. Other times they'll say there is no guarantee to when this player, when or how this player wore, this item. So a lot of times they'll sit in a office room, put on a hat, take it off. That hat will become a bunch of cards. Put on a hat, take it off. So, and that to me is manipulating the system. I prefer, if I'm going to collect those cards, I want something that was game used or on the field. That's a great question.
Danny, I asked you at the beginning, at the outset, that I've got like about 8. This is just the baseball cards, not getting into baseballs or anything, but just sticking to that tonight. So I call you up. At what point do you've got to have like a cab driver, you got to have the meters got to be running at some point. I know you want to be helpful to somebody, and I've asked you, you're going to come by this weekend for 15 or 20 minutes. It's probably going to turn into an hour and a half to 2 hours looking at stuff. At what point does Danny's need to make money, which is certainly legitimate with your expertise? When does that come in and sort of, let me help Gary or Stan as a buddy? When does that happen?
Thank you for the respect of the question. I do typically ask for people to send me pictures first, or give me an idea of what the collection might be. Right. Just because if they say I got one box of 1989 Topps, it's probably not worth my time, and I can give them an idea of what they have pretty quickly. If somebody calls me up and says, listen, I've been sitting on these Hall of Fame cards from the 60s, I really don't know what to do. Well, now we're in a situation where I'll figure out with that person, how we can work together, and depending on what they do. If somebody just wants, I've done divorce evaluations. Well, then I bill by the hour. There
Yeah.
are times where I'm just going through so many cards or doing so much legwork that I do have to bill by the hour.
Do you have some type of certified, appraiser, yourself, where if somebody says, well, what is why am I paying you?
Yeah, fair question. So
Yeah.
in this industry, you want to be certified by companies like PSA for the grading and,
Okay.
and JSA for autographs. So the good news is there are third parties in this industry that everybody uses. And we were having an off-air conversation. If you want to get autographs authenticated, there's certain companies you go to
Yeah.
for that. So I don't actually do the authentication. I don't have to worry about that. What I do is basically I'm a little older than people may realize. I started doing shows. I was a dealer in the mid 90s when Owings Mills Mall had shows, or the Pikesville VFW. I would be setting up with tables, and doing shows back then. So I've got 30 years of experience, and I've seen the markets go up and down. I know where the trends are. My full-time job is in this industry. I consult with tech companies on the West Coast that are coming up with technological products for the future of this hobby and different things. But at the same time, I'm going to take my son to Philadelphia on Sunday, and we're just going to go to a card show, and I'll do a little business, but we'll have fun being fans.
So my other question, and I don't mean this insultingly at all, is how does the person that would call Danny Black at Baltimore Sports Collectibles, give the email address out, by the way? How can they get in touch with you?
Everything I do is under SportsBalt, Sports BALT, short for Baltimore. So it's Danny at sportsbalt.com, at SportsBalt on Twitter and Instagram, and Facebook. So it's SportsBalt everywhere.
All right. So somebody contacts you, you walk into their house, just human nature as it is, you see something of value. I know you're an ethical guy, but what can happen? How do you then choose to give the person advice? Do you go, wow, wait a minute, this clock is worth $10,000, or do you sort of, kind of feel him out if he knows what it's worth? How does that dynamic take place?
Well, two things. First of all, thank you for what you said at the beginning. The truth of it is, yeah, I'm just going to be honest. But how do I approach it? I approach it from the stance of, this is not going to be the biggest client I may ever have, but this person's going to have a friend. So let's figure out the person in front of me. How can I help them? What is their goal? And a lot of times I'll work on commission, so we're in it together. And that way, there's the mutual trust factor there. They know I'm working for both of our mutual interests. And that I find a lot of times works better than me making an offer, because every time you make an offer, you end up insulting somebody, and it's a process I don't like. And sometimes people, they to be blunt, Stan, they want a cash offer, and I have to be in business. You have to buy at a certain price and sell at a certain price. So that is never going to feel as comfortable to me to be in the best
partnership. As the partnership.
That being said, sure, if somebody's in that situation, that certainly comes up, and we handle that, however we need to.
All right. Yeah.
Annie, let me ask you a question about vintage cards and also about today's trend. So I want to go back, and then I want to go forward again. Whenever we talk about vintage cards, it always seems we talk about baseball cards, right? We talk about, whether it be Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, the cards back in the 60s. It always seems to revolve around baseball cards. What about the other sports? What about the Johnny Unitas cards, or the George Mikan or Wilt Chamberlain cards? Hall of Famers, icons from other sports. We never seem to talk about those other sports. Why is that?
You see the smile on my face, because I think that is one of the fastest growing up and coming markets in the hobby coming up, without a doubt. The respect for the history of the other sports took a little while to catch up. Baseball's history is just unique for whatever reason, connecting the generations, Ken Burns, wherever we want to point it. Baseball's had this connection. and they were baseball cards, and they were baseball card stores, and the production was always baseball cards by far. But now you have people saying, wow, vintage cards are really cool. You know, I'm a basketball fan. You mean Pete Maravich has a rookie card? Oh, that's really cool. You know, and yes, it is. To get a Pete Maravich rookie card is really cool. So when you have YouTube now, and you have, you know, a lot of people being exposed to the players that they couldn't be exposed to necessarily in the 80s or 90s, now they're going and saying, hey, I want to get some of these football players or basketball players that maybe I wasn't as familiar with, or the cards didn't have the value. And now they're going up just like the baseball cards are. So
Are they much rarer, Danny, because not as cards cards were printed of
Yeah,
them
I think
because
so,
of the
yeah.
fact that the
100%.
NBA, the company knew, and well, these are basketball cards. They're not as valuable as baseball. So it might now, years later, up the value.
Yeah, they made a fraction of the football and basketball cards. You could have added up every sport together, and it still would have been 1/100th of the baseball cards. And if you guys remember going to the pharmacy or the drugstore, I mean, if you think about it, it really was most of the time, you know, mostly baseball cards.
Yeah, Danny, I remember one year, Stan, you may remember it also. It was either late 60s or early 70s, maybe both. Maybe it was a few years. The basketball cards, they were almost like double the size of the baseball cards. They were longer, you know, than just like a, you know, regular card. I thought it was so, and maybe it's because the basketball players were bigger. I don't know, taller. But anyway, I just thought it was so cool.
Actually, they're called tall boys. So
Oh, really? Okay.
They are actually called tall boys.
Right. So, and that kind of takes me to today. So today, you know, baseball was actually, some would say, on the decline in terms of popularity, and football and basketball, you know, have shot up. So what's the market like now in terms of baseball vis-a-vis football, basketball, etc.?
It's very interesting. The modern sports are much more reactionary than the vintage players. And I think there's a number of reasons. Number one, Mickey Mantle's not going to get hurt again. You know, we already know what's happened with his career, where if I want to invest a lot of money in Luka, you know, there's risk there. He might be one of the best players ever, and it could be a good investment, but you know, you're an injury away, unfortunately, on a current player. So whether it's a reaction to getting knocked out of the playoffs and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen cards going down a hair, or if it's a reaction to an injury, the modern cards move much faster up and down. The vintage cards are much more stable. Now,
I think Steve Bisciotti is having that very debate within himself about the real Lamar Jackson.
well, and actually, there's a lot of people think it's a good time to buy Lamar if you believe in it, because his value's down right now, you know, from a card perspective. And well, it's similar to stocks. Uncertainty. People don't like uncertainty. They just want to know the day Lamar signs, whoever it's with, or if he's traded or whatever happens, his card prices will go up literally just by taking away the uncertainty. So that's always a weird dynamic. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stan.
No, I was. Did you have another one, Gary? Or go ahead.
Yeah, I do have one more. I wanted to specifically talk about Pete Rose. Pete Rose has the fact that he had the off-field gambling issues and he's not in the Hall of Fame affected the value of his card. A. B. If he finally does get into the Hall of Fame, what does that do to the value of the card?
Pete Rose is an interesting guy because what he spent most of his post-career doing, I think, has ruined his likability as much as probably what the gambling did to him. Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, a lot of people see us, it's a little bit of a sad guy sitting inside a Vegas store, you know, all day. You know, he will literally sign, I'm sorry, I bet on baseball for $25 and you can walk right up.
Wow.
And he's been doing this every day, you know, for decades. And so I don't know that there's a lot of love in Philadelphia or Cincinnati. I just don't know that he's got that fan base that other players do. If he makes the Hall of Fame, there's going to be a bump because there's people who collect Hall of Famers just because they collect Hall of Famers. So you're going to see a little bit of a bump, or some people who want to invest in him. He's just not loved, unfortunately. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Picking up on Gary asking you about cards, and then you showed us the card of Jordan Westburg. Let's go over some of these current Oriole hot prospects. Because this is something, I mean, I've been aware that there were minor league cards, but I didn't know they came with uniforms and autographed by the player. What are we talking about if somebody is out there and says, hey, I'd like to get I used to collect cards years ago. I'd like to get my son or daughter into it. What are you looking at buying cards of Jordan Westberg, Kobe Mayo, Colton Cowser, and all those hot prospects?
I tell people if you're buying prospects, buy it for the entertainment value. Don't spend beyond your means. It's a little bit of a lottery ticket type of thing, because if the teams were good enough to guarantee who would go to the majors, then we would certainly know which cards to buy.
Right.
But so I try to invest in players because I follow the minor leagues. I mean, Stan, you and I have talked about this
Yep.
forever. I follow from the very entry level. So I'm even buying guys that were drafted last year that haven't even played much. And I try to get in very early. If you're looking for Orioles prospects, for the Orioles, it's good. We've got all the top prospects. For prices, it's bad because they're all very expensive to buy right now.
That's
So
what I
you're-
was going to ask you, like a Colton Cowser. What is he going for? Is it $20 a card? Is it more than that?
Well, his very base cards are going to have no long-term value. So they're going to end up becoming $1 or $2 cards. It's the autograph cards, the limited edition ones. And there you're talking anywhere from, $75 to $1,500 or more, depending on the card.
Wow.
Because they've got these super limited edition autograph versions and
who is
everything else.
is Fanatics putting them out under the
Fanatics
name of Topps?
technically owns Topps, but Topps is still running independent, and Topps owns the Bowman name. So Bowman is the big baseball brand, but that is Topps, and technically that's Fanatics.
And when did they start doing these signed cards with young players, realizing they could make a fool's ransom, so to speak?
About 10 or 15 years ago, they realized that once you could have a contract, and it was really has to do with the players union and being able to use the uniform logos and the deal with the players themselves to be able to get them on the cards. Once all that got worked out, it was a matter of, printing money to a certain extent. The Mike Trout rookie card, which is not dissimilar in the look to the Jordan Westberg. You're talking 6-7 figures. And that's nothing fancier than what I have with Jordan Westberg. Just he won't turn into Mike Trout. So I hope he's worth my investment. I paid under $100 for this card, but the Jordan Westberg card, I hopefully, knock on wood, is the type of card that's going to sell for, let's say, $200 or $300 very shortly.
And a couple questions. So the names that you guys just mentioned, for a casual fan, they may not know those names because those aren't the highest prospects. So let's take it to an Adley Rutschman or a Gunnar Henderson, somebody like that, right?
Yeah.
Can you compare the price for an Adley Rutschman card when he was selected by the Orioles compared to what it is today? Gunnar Henderson, same thing, back then, today.
Good question.
Great question. So there's a curve on expectations, and believe it or not, the expectations, once they move up that prospect list and you got top 100, price goes up. Top 50, price goes up. Well, you get to number one, Gary, and then you do it on two guys in a row. That was kind of when both of them peaked out.
Yeah.
Gunner's got the chance at the rookie of the year this year, because of the at-bat. So he might have one more chance, but believe it or not, Adley has kind of leveled off at this point because it's hard to outplay the hype. He almost needs an all-star game or an MVP to really drive the value up another bump. But that gives you a chance to get to learn about more of the players, because I can't afford to go investing in a bunch of Adley Rutschman cards at this point. They're really prohibitive for an entry-level person.
For sports fans out there, do you find that there are any guys like Gary and I are buddies, and we know a couple other buddies, and all of a sudden we go, hey, let's put $1,000 each in and start a little collectors club as a partner.
Good one.
Is that something that you find people are doing because it gives you stronger leverage to buy stuff?
I advise 6 different clubs right now. It's a fantastic idea because when we talk about these vintage cards and these guys where you can really have something and that can be a steady, long-term kind of mutual fund investment, that's a heck of a lot more fun.
Yeah.
You know, and I know groups that are willing to take the risk to do it on prospects. Now that's a little riskier to play at that game at that level, but I know somebody who did very well in a Gunnar Henderson rookie, and it recently sold for $17,000. So that group did very well. But most of the time it is for vintage cards, and it's a fantastic idea. And I do encourage people, you know, if that helps you get a better card.
Hey, Gary, you got one more, and then we'll
I've
call
got
it
so
a-
many more, but okay.
but
So
we'll
one more.
have Danny on again in a couple of weeks. Okay.
Absolutely. So I'm interested in this college now, right? They have the NIL.
Yeah.
Is there, and maybe they do it already. Are there cards for college players they make money off of?
There are. The public doesn't seem to want them. It's
Okay.
really, everybody wants the pro uniform. So it seems to be all the value is really that first pro jersey card. They have what, you know, some of these cards are now called pre-rookies, or, you know, whatever you want to call them, but it's that first pro jersey. So basketball and football both seem to be that way, that they really want the pro uniform. But I mean, they are out there. Some of them, you know, definitely go for a few dollars, but all the real big ones are the officially licensed pro jersey.
Gotcha. Okay. We're good.
All right. Danny
Yeah.
Black of Baltimore Sports Collectibles.
You're good,
he's
man.
Danny at Balt sportsbalt.com, right?
Yep.
Danny at sportsbalt.com. We thank you for your information tonight, and we'll do this once in a while. All right. It's fascinating.
Thanks, Danny.
This is fun. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. He's really knows his stuff, and he is, I can swear by Danny's honorable character. All right. Even though he doesn't look it, I can swear by it. Gary, thank you.
Stanley, thank you.
Next Thursday, we've got Coach Jim Ferry on
Yep,
with
UMBC
us, UMBC basketball. Monday night, Assistant General Manager of the Orioles, Eve Rosenbaum, is going to join us as we talk baseball. Ross Grimsley and I, as we're at that time, we'll be about a week away from spring training starting. I know that brings a smile to all three of our faces. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much for joining us. Don't forget to Costas Inn. They've got great curbside pickup. CostasInn.com. That does it for tonight. We'll see you soon.